There are so many dimensions of our life that we don't understand, especially the concept of your brain and the power in your brain, right? And so I am going to be reading his bio, and I'm not going to do this alone. Solani is going to join me to do this interview because we have a big fish in the house. It's joining all the way from Australia. Last year, thereabout, I was in Australia virtually to run a session for them, and it was the one that facilitated it. It's someone I love and I respect. Borire is an award-winning neurologist, neuroscience researcher, neuro leadership expert, and executive coach who has a mandate to empower leaders to create personal, professional, and organizational change. He is also the director of Legacy Consult, a leadership development platform that equips leaders to improve their performance and inspire their teams to increase the productivity and profit of their organization using evidence-based and bespoke neuroscience solution. I love that, evidence-based. Because Africa, we don't like evidence-based at all. We like for it to come from heaven miraculously. Okay, he has a certification in the neuroscience for business from MIT, Boston, USA, as well as neuroscience of leadership from Enhancing Performance in Australia. He's also a John Maxwell Team Certified Trainer and Facilitator. He's the founder and host of Brain, Mind, and Change, an online series which combines his scientific background and leadership calling to teach people how to achieve mastery of their brain, rewire their mind, and change the world. I love that. He's also a thought leader and convener of Legacy, an annual conference for growth-oriented and change-driven leaders. Okay, now I noticed that you're somewhere in the house. I could almost bet that Dayo will be here because Dayo is about neuroscience and neuroscience. So when I got to the house this morning and I saw Dayo somewhere, I said, okay, it's Dayo. Neuroscience has brought you to House of Savior today, Abi. Okay, where is Tolani? Tolani is joining me to do this. So House of Saviors, let's welcome my brother, my friend, Dr. Borire. Please, House of Saviors, let's welcome him. Let's give him some energy. Let's give him some love. Let's show him some love. Okay, where are you guys? Welcome him. Okay, good. I can see you guys. I can feel you in the building. Okay, Dr. Nee, how are you? I know it's like please, can you unmute yourself? I know it's like 12 a.m. in Australia, so we do not take this for granted at all, right? I mean, to get you, it's already Monday, if I'm not making a mistake, over there in Australia already, isn't it?
Well, yeah, thanks for that warm welcome, and thank you for giving me that energy. Yeah, it's Monday morning here already, 12:23 a.m. Yeah, but I'm excited and I'm delighted to be here. So thanks for having me.
Okay, Tolani, how are you feeling today? I can see your red glasses.
Okay. I'm doing very well. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for joining us. So good to have you here, Sandy Borire. Please correct me. Did I pronounce your name correctly?
Yes, fair enough.
All right. It's good to have you here, sir.
Yeah, so we're just going to dive straight into what we have today. You know, we are looking at how to prime your brain for limitless living. We're looking at limitlessness in House of Saviors. We meet every Sunday, and we're looking at limitless living this month. But we don't want to come here and say, oh, pray that God should give me a limitless life. No, there's a science to this thing. So we are very, very practical. So when I saw, when I read in your bio that it's evidence-based, you know, that's what I believe. I believe 1 + 1 is equal to 2. If everyone knows that 1 + 1 is equal to 2, then everyone can replicate it and produce that result. But when 1 + 1 is equal to 3, and nobody knows how it became 3, it becomes a mystery. Then if it's a mystery, then a few people will say they own it. Then other people will be coming every time to come and be, you know, tapping that mystery small by small, little by little. And I don't think that's sustainable. So I want to welcome you. I want to believe that our people are going to benefit tremendously from your world of experience. But I would like to curiously ask, you know, what exactly is neuroscience, if I may ask, because people just hear neuroscience, I mean, I follow Dr. Joe Dispenza, whom is one of my greatest teachers, and I know that is also equally, a neuroscientist. And I know that John Asherab also talks a lot about neuroscience. What exactly is neuroscience, and why should we be interested in neuroscience?
Well, thanks again for having me, and thanks for the introduction, and welcome to everyone here. And so hopefully we're going to have a wonderful time talking about science. So neuroscience is that part of science that deals with the nervous system, pretty much. Is very simple definition. So it's that part of medical science that focuses on understanding how the brain works and in connection with the rest of the nervous system. So we all have nervous systems, and our nervous system is the connection that we have with the world. Our nervous system allows us to be able to perceive our world, connect with our world, and control our world. Our nervous system also allows us to be able to connect ourselves, to understand our own bodies, to understand the way we're designed. All right. So without the nervous system, we have no perception of our worlds. So one simple way of understanding the way our nervous systems are arranged is to look at what, in fact, the nervous system helps us to appreciate. So it starts with our sensory experiences. So without the nervous system, we will have no sensations. And our sensations can be related to sight, can be touch, can be feeling, or it can be auditory. So you're listening to my voice right now, you're having a sensory experience. Your nervous system allows you to be able to experience my voice, even though I'm far away from most people. I'm not sure whether there are any Aussies here or any Kiwis here, anyone, connecting from this part of the world. But we're able to do this through technology, and you're able to have this sensory experience with me right now. Your nervous system allows you to do that. So it starts with our sensory experiences, then it goes to our perception. All right. So our nervous system allows us to focus on certain sensory experiences. So any sensory experience that comes to the center, to the focus of your attention, is what you perceive. So your perception is limited, actually. So we can't perceive everything, for example. Otherwise you will get a sensory overload. But those sensory experiences that come to the center of your attention is what you perceive, and your brain or your nervous system allows you to perceive things. Now, there are many sensory experiences, for example, that you have right now that you will not perceive. And that's just the way we're wired. Our brain allows us to be able to focus on things that are really important to what we need to achieve per time. So, for example, Tolani has this beautiful pair of glasses on. You would not remember that you have the glasses on all the time. In fact, if I've not mentioned it right now, you had forgotten that you had a pair of glasses on. Now your brain is aware that you got a pair of glasses on all the time. All right. But even though every second of the last few minutes, your brain has been aware of the glasses, you are not aware of it. Some of you would not know that there's a blue poster, part of a blue poster showing behind me, which is indicative of the kind of football team I support. And you may be looking at that now because you're perceiving that right now, okay, and zeroing in on that. So you can't really perceive everything that you see, all right? But perception is something that we'll talk about later, because really you cannot really maximize your potential and live a limited life if you cannot sharpen your perception to be able to zero in on things. There are a lot of things that you really need in life that are in your background that need to come into the foreground. And a lot of us miss some of those little details when we get overwhelmed, when we're in a stress state, when we're in a threat state. We lose sight of those things that are really important for us to live limitlessly. So I'm just building it up, okay, that it's probably better to understand neuroscience by understanding what neuroscience allows us to do, or allows us to be able to experience. I hope can you guys hear me clearly? Am I?
Yeah, we can hear you. We are enjoying you. I mean, you're blowing our mind already.
Okay, so we've got sensory experiences, and then we've got our perceptions, and then following that, we can then talk about our own thoughts. All right, or even before thoughts, we talk about we can talk about thoughts. All right, and thoughts are completely, if we have a conversation about thoughts and the science of thought and the power of thought is limitless. All right, thought is that part of every one of us. Perception is limited, but thought is limitless. You can't perceive everything, but you can think about anything. You can think about something that has never happened before. You can think about something that will never happen. You can think about the past. You can think about the life of Jesus for those who are people of faith here and imagine how it was. And you can think about the future of a futuristic world of of a world you probably would not live in. You can think about an atom you would never see with your naked eyes. And you can think about Pluto, a huge planet that you probably would never touch. Thought is limitless, all right? And so for those who are Christians, yeah, I'm a person of faith here, and when I ever remember Ephesians chapter 3, verse 20, when it says that God is able to do above what we can ask or think. Now imagine that if our thoughts are limitless. The other day I saw my son in the shower on a school day. He's 11, and my boy has this wonderful imagination. He's just like me. I like daydreaming a lot. And he just stayed in the shower, was there, hot shower for too long. So I went in there to just look at him. And my son was standing like that, looking into the ceiling, lost in thought. And so I screamed at him. I said, get out of here right now. You're going to getting late for school. So on the way to school, as I was dropping him off, I asked him, what were you really thinking about? And he said, Dad, I was just imagining myself being a Japanese ninja. Now, my son is as African as it would be, African Australian. He's born here in Australia, but both of his parents are Africans, and he has no Japanese blood in him. But my son, for that period of time, was imagining himself as a Japanese and as a ninja. All right. And he lived in that world. He was creating that world in his own mind. All right. That tells you the limitless power of thought. And of course, the following Sunday, I came to church and I was teaching about Ephesians 3:20. And I said, can you imagine that someone, this 11-year-old, was thinking about being a Japanese ninja? How impossible is that? Now, when God says that he's able to do exceeding, abundant, above what you ask or think. Now, I don't want to start preaching here, but that just gives you a different dimension into spirituality and what that entails. Let me just shift away from thought. I'm just trying to pick up a few different things. And you get down to emotions. Okay, emotions are biological programs that run from the inside of us. All right. Emotions run rapidly. The average duration of every emotion is about 8 milliseconds. And may I also tell you that every hour of your life, you express about 149 different emotions. Now, not all of these emotions get cognitive resonance. Not all of these emotions would occupy a cognitive space. And not all of these emotions will be perceptible or you would be conscious of. So we're not conscious of a lot of the emotions that we experience. But interestingly, a lot of all these emotions affect the way we view our world, the way we react to people, all right, and the way we engage people. There's something in psychology called value tagging, which is the value your brain assigns to every sensory experience that you have. So for example, if you meet somebody who you don't think is really important at the airport, you may not really engage them. If they walk towards you, be like, hey, you're encroaching in my space. But if that person has to come close to you, happens to be someone like Oprah Winfrey, all right, that sensory experience will be tagged at a higher value. Your facial expression, everything will change. You'll be welcoming, you'll be smiling, you try to make eye contact, you want them to see you. You'll be like, there's just that. And a lot of all those things happen at a very subconscious level. You're not even aware of all those reactions, all right, but you're already positioning yourself to be able to have closer contact with that person. So your emotions are very important. And we can't even go into talking a lot about emotions now, but but then these emotions are also part of our nervous system. Our nervous system produce the emotions, and when we're conscious of them, they now become feelings. All right. So what we often call emotions are actually feelings. When they now occupy our cognition, and we are able to give them context, and our past experience will come into play, then they become feelings, and that's often what we perceive. So you have the sensory experiences, you've got the perception, you've got thoughts, you've got emotions, all right? And of course, when you put all of those things together, you now have behaviors, all right, our own actions. But the reality is that a lot of the actions that we see, observable behaviors that we see, only 10% of our behaviors are actually observable. A lot of the behaviors are already primed at the subconscious level and are not obvious to see. Of course, then behaviors that are now repeated continuously over a period of time will now become habits. All right. So when you automate a behavior over a period of time, consistently, routinely, repetitively, it becomes habits. And if you're really going to be limitless, if you're going to operate at peak performance, then you have to know how to automate healthy behaviors that will consistently deliver the results that you want. That's what I teach in my peak performance classes, how you can automate healthy behaviors to consistently deliver, all right, you the results that you want. So rather than going so deep, so technical into what neuroscience is or is not, what I've tried to do is to just give you a few of the different aspects of our lives that neuroscience helps us to understand. All right. And then a lot of all these things are, listen, I can run a whole 2-week masterclass on emotions alone. All right. And help people break that down. So this is just very, very surface level. now, finally, let me, just before I drop this, the final thing I'll talk about with neuroscience is that we're looking at the nervous system and just to the different aspects of the nervous system, which we can look at: parasympathetic, sympathetic nervous system, autonomic nervous system. But let me put it this way. The part of the nervous system we focus on mostly is the central nervous system. So there's a central system and there's a peripheral system. The central system is made up of the brain and the spinal cord. All right, the central nervous system. I'll just usually get my brain model here. So the central nervous system is usually made up of the brain and the nervous and the spinal cord. If we have time, I can talk about a few parts of the brain that would be that are involved in your cognition, decision making, strategic decision making, and in all the other things I've talked about, emotions and all that. So depending on how the conversation goes. But
thank you. Yeah, I'm taking notes, and I just feel like going to school to study neuroscience right now. That's the way I feel, because this is almost like the most critical part of any human being. Yet it's not taught. I mean, if you're on this call, this is looking like the first time you are having a bit of understanding about your brain. Can you just type I on the chat box? Let me just take a simple sample survey, right? Just type I if you feel you don't even understand your brain at all, right? How it works, the science of your brain. Can you type I? Let me see. Now, Dr. Nee, I'll tell you what. Okay, so you can see people are showing up. And we've carried this brain all our lives, because we are told, if you go to religious space, you hear your brain is too small. Your brain is too small. And I keep asking questions. If you say this brain is too small for God to use, everything you are using is made from the brain. Is the human mind that created many of these things. In fact, if science withdraws everything they've made, you have literally nothing, right? So I want you to dig deeper, delve a bit deeper into the brain, because it was as if you picked into a question. We want to know, how does the human brain work? Because many people have a brain that has not been explored. So if you don't even know how this brain works, what is inside your brain, you won't even know. You just, and I say this all the time here, everything we just say, pray about it. We don't even talk about thinking. You just talk about the science of thought. People don't know that thought has a science, that there's a science to behavior, there's a science to emotion. People don't know. So can you take us a bit deeper into what is inside this brain and how does this brain work? Over to you.
Okay. Thank you for that question. All right. We can explore all the parts of the brain. Right. We can't. I am even still studying about the brain. All right. I reckon that in the last, since the year started, I've bought more than a dozen books on the brain itself. All right. More than a dozen books. And most of them I'm not going to completely read anyway. Most of them are reference materials. So it's a constant exploration. Now, but I'm just going to talk about a few parts of the brain that I think will be relevant to this conversation. All right. So I'm going to talk about the part of the brain. I've got a brain model here. All right, which is called the prefrontal cortex. It's in the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe. So the brain is made up of different lobes. There's a frontal lobe which is at the front. All right, and we call it prefrontal cortex. Prefrontal cortex. CORTEX. All right, PFC for short. Now, the PFC is really part of the brain that is essential for our executive functions. When we say executive functions, we're talking about thinking, planning, decision making, our ability to discriminate between two choices, no, go, yes, no. All of that is within the prefrontal cortex, the PFC. PFC is the seat for logic, where we're able to sit down and reason and work out things. It's that part of the brain that gives us our self-consciousness and our self-identity, helps us to identify ourselves and to know who we are. All right, that's the PFC. So it has a lot of it plays a huge role in self-identity, self-regulation as well. Self-regulation in the sense of inhibition. So many times you may feel like doing something, but you don't act based on how you feel because your PFC inhibits you. How many times have you watched, some of these comedy skits of somebody having an argument on the road? Maybe someone hits your car, you step out of the car, and then you find out the person that hit your car is a big man, a giant, and then suddenly you modulate your behavior and you don't act based on how you feel. It's your PFC, it inhibits you, all right? Now that someone else who is junior to you or who you think you can trash may do the same thing, and then you just flip on them. That's why some men, will get angry at their wives for silly little things, all right? But then they get to work and they would even experience a lot more. Or for those of us who are diasporans and those of us who attend certain kinds of churches like my own self, where, on Monday they call you Steve and John, and then you get to church, they don't call you daddy, you get upset, all right? And all of that is just within your PFC. So just to summarize, the prefrontal cortex, the frontal lobe, helps with executive functions, decision making, helps you to discriminate options, helps you with your self-identity, and also helps with self-regulation. It's that part of the brain that alcohol knocks out. When you're tipsy, you become more just start talking and you lose your sense of inhibition. And when people are drunk, they can behave abnormally because they pretty much knock out their frontal lobes. We call that, in a way, the thinking part of the brain. Now, I'm going to come back to the PFC because even though it's a very important part of the brain, it also forms what we call the default mode network. The default mode network. There's a default mode in all of us. And you hear this a lot from people who have done neuro-linguistic programming and people who, there are a lot of mindset coaches out right there now. Almost everyone is a mindset coach. And I really don't even understand what a mindset coach is, to be honest with you. Even what a mindset is. But let's just leave that now because there are a lot of scammers out there. Gosh, these people have distracted me now. I was talking about the PFC, and that's what mindset coaches do. They destroy, they occupy our space. Now, so that's the thinking part of the brain, okay? It's a very essential part of the brain, the thinking brain, okay? But there's a more primitive part of the brain, which is the feeling brain, and it's part of what we call the limbic system. All right, you don't have to go into all the details of this, but the limbic system is a more primitive part of the brain. Almost all mammals have it, even reptiles have it. Is that primitive part of the brain that helps us with feeling. We call it the feeling brain, okay? So imagine you've got a thinking brain and then the feeling brain, and both of them are on a seesaw. I'm not sure what what a seesaw is. There's a central lever in between, and then you've got a seesaw. And our thinking and our feeling are always, they need to be on a good balance. You need to have a good balance between thinking and feeling. Now, the reality is that when your feelings are overwhelming, your thinking you do less of thinking. And in fact, when you're in emotionally overcharged situations, there's increased blood flow to the feeling part of the brain and less blood flow to the thinking part of the brain. And that's why a lot of people will not act. They act based on how they feel. And then, after that, how many times have you had an argument with your spouse or your partner and then regretted what you said? All right. And that's often because in that situation, your feelings have overwhelmed your thinking. All right. Now, the limbic system, which helps with feeling, also helps with emotion generation. And there's one tiny little structure within the limbic system called the amygdala. It's the size of a small almond seed, very, very small. But this is an emotions generator. All right. It's responsible for fight, flight, or freeze response. I'm not sure that you've heard of the 3 Fs: fight, flight, or freeze. response. And so that's our response to stress. When we're overwhelmed with stress, or when we encounter threat, or when we encounter anything, the amygdala fires out the emotions. Those emotions can then change us biologically, meaning that you get stress responses, stress hormones. So let's assume you see a structure on the road that looks like a snake. All right. Immediately you see that, you have that sensory experience, your amygdala, all right, booms, starts to fire. And when it fires, it generates this emotion called fear. Now, a lot of people do not know that God created fear. All right, people get it twisted, really. And so fear not, fear not, fear not. What you don't understand is that without fear, you'll be dead. Fear is actually essential to life. All right. And so fear is meant to keep you, to make us survive. In fact, T.D. Jakes once said it, that God gave you a brain so you give him rest. All right. Our brain's main role is to keep us alive. All right. Now, of course, God doesn't want us to live in fear, but we need to have fear, because without fear, we will not be able to learn from our environment. All right. And not be able to run away from things that are harmful to us. So when we experience things that are a threat to our lives, all right, our amygdala generates that emotional response. And when that happens, you get the stress, you get those hormones, adrenaline, cortisol. I'm not sure whether I'm using too many big words, but those hormones can then, what they do is to increase blood flow to your muscles. They get your pupils dilated so you see, clearly, and then you're in a fight response. Now, you're not designed to be in that very heightened emotional state all the time. The problem is that for some people, they are in that kind of high state even when there's no threat. Now, remember that there's a negative bias in all our brains, and that's just because our brains have been wired to keep us alive. So there's a negative bias in our brains. Our brains are constantly searching for threat at the rate of 5 hertz. So 5 times every second, your brain is constantly searching for threat. When man was a hunter-gatherer, it was, the lion and the bear in the forest. But now, whether you like it or not, your brain is constantly searching for threat at a subconscious level. All right. Now, I don't want to go too far, all right, but I think to just make it in a very simple way, if you can just get away with those 2 aspects of the brain, your thinking brain and your feeling brain, and understanding there has to be a balance with it. The other thing I will say about the PFC, which is your thinking brain, is that the PFC is very, very fuzzy, all right, so you need the right neurochemical balance in your brain for your thinking brain to work properly. What most people don't understand is that out of 24 hours, you only have 4 hours of peak performance from your PFC. All right. So you can imagine that in 24 hours, your brain would only operate at its peak, all right, state of cognition for about 4 hours. That means your executive function, your decision making, your ability to, properly decipher things and operate at that level, that is, your level of genius. All right. So how you plan your day, how you execute that, depends on, everyone is wired differently. Some people have a morning brain, some people have an afternoon brain, some people have an evening brain. If I ask you now, I'm sure a lot of people will say, and maybe we can even do this survey to see how many people have a morning brain, how many people, like you've got an evening brain. When everyone shuts down, that's when you warm up. All right. Not sure whether that answers your question, but that's just, I'm trying not to overdo it. Hey, I have the temptation. If you allow me to talk, we will be here forever, man. I'm in my zone.
Thank you. Tolani, you want to go next?
Oh, yes. You mentioned 2 things that I want to touch on before I ask the next question. You talked about the fact that the thought is limitless, right? And you also talked about the fact that we need to learn how to meet healthy behaviors. Now, my next question is the human brain limited? You talked about our thoughts being limitless, right? What about the human brain? What's the correlation between that human brain and our thoughts? But my main question is the human brain limited, and what can limit the brain?
Well, I think it depends on, our limitedness or limitness, also our limits. Depends on how you approach it, whether from a biological perspective or from a psychological one or even a philosophical one. All right. I think starting from a philosophical point of view, we're all limited. And in fact, one of the things I've been learning from sort of my own sort of spiritual work, and I've been teaching recently, is understanding and embracing our own limits. this whole idea that we don't have limits is not true. And I think that we'll be deceiving ourselves. And in fact, one of the things I'm learning in my own journey of emotional health is embracing my limits. All right. And that, gosh, I need to understand. Today I was teaching our church today, or yesterday, which is Sunday, this is Monday now, I was teaching in church that God particularly places limits. Every season of our lives, God puts limits in our lives. And those limits are meant, some of them are meant to be embraced, meaning that I'm not meant to love everyone. Well, no, not love everyone. I'm not meant to be friends to everyone. I'm not meant to impact everyone. I'm not meant to attend every meeting. I can't speak everywhere. All right. I can't do everything. Jesus did not heal every sick person. Jesus did not win everyone. Jesus, even people in his own family did not. When Jesus started his ministry in Galilee, if you know the map of Israel, which was in the northern part, in Capernaum, they wanted to make him king. All right. And he ran away and he said, no, I'm going down to Jerusalem. All right. Jesus did not take every opportunity. All right. And so limits are very important. And our lives, God works with us in seasons. Every season of our lives, we have limits. So I'm just starting from a philosophical point of view that we should, because there's a tendency, if you've read a few books, I've got this book by Jim Quick, Limitless. One has to be very careful in understanding how this works. So I think from a philosophical point of view, there are certain limits, all right, that bound our lives. And those limits have to be, for example, I'm not sent to everyone. And there's no doubt about that. I can't change everyone. But there are the people that I've been sent to. I know that I've got to really maximize my impact on their lives. Now, if you now correlate that to the brain itself. The brain is a huge supercomputer, billions of neurons. All right. In fact, the processing power of the brain is more than any supercomputer that has been ever built. All right. So when it comes to the power of the brain itself, the connections of the brain itself, and the millions, every single second, over 120 million connections are firing right now. Your brain is a mesh of neurons, billions of neurons. And what are neurons? Neurons are like nerve cells that connect with each other. All right, they connect with each other and communicate through chemicals at synapses. Synapses are junctions between neurons. All right, so they communicate with each other. All right, firing and acting and activating each other. So imagine that that's going on every single second of our lives from the day we were born. All right, it's just amazing, the architecture of our nervous system. All right, so in the power of the brain is limitless in a sense. All right, but then the reality is that for our lives, all right, in terms of how we enjoy or how we interact with that power, we cannot always activate all of it, but we can maximize it. We can operate. What annoys me the most is that a lot of people are not living up to their potential when it comes to the ability of their nervous system in terms of the way they perceive their world, they understand their world, and in terms of the way they can engage with their world. And of course, because I see that God has been referenced so much, and that's why I'm using a lot of examples in scripture. For example, 2 years ago, I have a book club and we wrote about Agar, because I just wanted to talk about the story of Agar. I've just found this woman as a very fascinating woman in the Bible. And the title of the book is Agar, Unloved and Unwanted. I'm not trying to promote my book, but I'm sure you don't mind if I talk about the book.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah. So we wrote a book. I got about 7 or 8 of my mentees and we came together. All of them were first-time authors on that project. And we wrote the book Agar, Unloved and Unwanted. And we just talked about the story of Agar from a very, very different way. We did a lot of research on Agar's life. And one of the fascinating things about Agar was when she took her son and she was sent out of the house by Abraham, and she was in a state of threat. She was overwhelmed with a lot of negative emotions. And one of the things is when you're in a threat state, all right, your perception narrows, you get a narrow focus, you get less insights, less revelation, you're not engaged. So your nervous system pretty much goes into a threat state. You focus on the problem, you become problem focused. So a lot of that's without the limits of the brain. Your brain becomes very limited. All right. So the limitlessness of our brains can be enhanced when we get out of a threat state into what we call a reward state, where we're able to generate insight, we can perceive our worlds. But those who live in a threat state where they're full of negative emotions, and remember, there's a negative bias in your brain. That's why bad news sells. That's why, fear sells, negative things sells, all right? Because that's just the way we are designed. And so people who live in that constant threat state, they don't, and that was the story of Agar. Agar was in a state of threat. She had a son for a man that Everything that happened in Agar's life was without her own agency. When she was taken as a slave, nobody consulted her. When she became a surrogate mother for Sarah, nobody consulted her. It was a conversation between Sarah and Abraham. She was a young, beautiful girl, I believe, who was a teenager when she was taken away from her father's house, and now spent over a decade in the house of a man. She had to sleep with a man that was old enough to be her grandfather. All right. And she got pregnant. She had a son. Now, when they had their own son and they didn't need her anymore, what did they do? They tossed her out. They didn't consult her. And imagine being woken up in the early hours of the day by a man who is the father of your son, giving you some few supplies. Abraham was a very rich man. He had hundreds of thousands of people. Abraham did not give her security. Abraham just sent her out of the house with a son, a few supplies. All right, nothing. She became a single mother in the blink of an eye with no job, nothing, no protection, nothing. She had left Egypt a long time ago, and now she was sent out in the wilderness with nothing. So imagine the kind of overwhelming emotion, negative emotion that Agar would have been. And that was just what fascinated me about the story of this amazing woman. She was walking through the wilderness. Her son was about to die. She could not watch Ishmael die. She could not watch Ishmael die. So she put Ishmael under a tree. She took a few steps forward, buried her head, and she was crying and she was praying. And God had to stop that prayer session because it wasn't a time for prayer. God looked at Ishmael. Ishmael is going to die. And God sent an angel to her and said, hey, stop praying. You know what God said? What fascinated me there? God told her that the cry of the boy has reached heaven. In fact, the cry of the boy. And when I read that scripture the first time, God told me, do you know how many people have put their dreams? Ishmael is the dream, you know. In fact, Ishmael means God has remembered me. And for a lot of people, their Ishmael is their dream. All right. And they've abandoned their dreams and they're crying and looking for other alternatives. And God said that the cry of Ishmael had reached heaven before your own prayers. Stop praying. There's a well behind you. Go and get water. Listen, the angel did not dig the well. It wasn't a miracle. The well had always been there. But when you're in a threat state, you don't see opportunities. She was just so overwhelmed with so much emotion that she did not see the well that was there. The angel will not go there to dig the well. Stop prayer. It's not time to pray. Open your eyes. There's a well there. All right. I prepared that. There's a provision there already. You're in the right place. A lot of people are in the right place. They're in the center of God's will for their lives. And because they're just overwhelmed with threat and all that, they can't even see what has been provided for them. Their perception is so narrow. They are focused on the problem. They are crying, going from one prayer meeting to the other. The other day, I was telling my mom, please stop all of this. 6 o'clock, we want to watch news. And my mom, she's just around now. She goes, she was watching all these YouTube prayers. Like, I appreciate YouTube prayers and all that, but we can't be listening to prayers all day. Come on, we have to chill and listen to news too and engage with our world and do a few different things, And so that was what God was telling her at the time, that listen, open your eyes and see your world and see what I've provided for you. So I'm trying to put a little bit of perspective to this whole conversation so that, number one, we're not too arrogant to think that our lives, particularly in the area of motivation, and we get too carried away about, oh yes, you limitless means, you just like that. Yeah, it's true. All right. But there are certain things that no matter how, like, we're still human beings. All right. And so as long as my own view of having a limitless brain is you operating at peak performance, of you being able to perceive the things you need to perceive, understanding your world, generating insights, having revelation, all right, and being able to maximize what has been provided to you, all right. And if you're not in that space, then yes, you're making a big mistake. But I hope
Yeah. I mean, you are killing it. Trust me. I mean, the Agar perspective was I've never studied her, so I mean, I'm going to have to go and study that because you just threw another dimension to it. I mean, I'm looking at the abusive dimension to what that lady went through. From what you just shared. I'm sure we can get the book on Amazon, or where can we get it?
Yeah, Agar, Unloved and Unwanted.
Please.
Yeah.
Alani, can you help us put it on the chat box? We can please go order for that book because so when people don't understand the background, they just behave anyhow, And so from what you were saying, it just dawned on me, and I was having a conversation, with someone in the wee hours of the morning about watch and pray, that the order is actually to first watch before you pray. And that's what you're saying, that what we do is we pray, we don't watch. that if you can perceive your world, because the well has always been there. Many of the things you're looking for is around you, but in a perpetual state of flight, in a fight, you cannot see. And I mean, it's almost like in Africa, for example, we are perpetually in stress. So we can't even pause to think. Now, I am going to ask my next question. I mean, I've had Dr. Joe Dispenza says that neurons that wire together fire together. I've had him say that, all the time. So I wanted to talk about neurons and how it affects human behavior. So on one side, so neurons that fire together, wire together. How does our neurons affect our behavior? But on the other side is how can we exercise the human brain practically? What are the activities we can do? So those are two questions in one.
Fantastic. What I would do here in terms of the exercises, I'll come back to the exercises, probably just focus on one because of time, because I prefer to just mention one or two and then focus on them and explain them properly rather than just list out things that will not make sense.
Yeah.
So starting with neurons that fire together, wire together, yes. And in fact, that is connected to what we call the Hebbian principle or Ebb's law, which is one of the laws that govern habit formation. All right. What that means is that old networks do not deconstruct. And I'm going to explain that. Now, the reality is that when every human behavior is underpinned by some by networks in the brain. All right. In fact, let's go to habits, for example, which is what I really specialize in. I'm interested in habit formation. Every habit that you have, all right, has a neuronal circuit with it. All right. And there's a reason why old habits die hard. Now, those habits are formed over a period of time. Now, there are two ways of forming habits. You can form habits through repetition for things that do not require a lot of focus. So, for example, if you brush your teeth in a particular way, all right, if you do that over and over and over and over again, it becomes a habit, all right. And in fact, most of those habits are non-contextual habits, meaning that it doesn't matter what the context is, you still do it. Some of you will pray every morning. It's become a habit for you to pray every morning. It doesn't matter where you are, whatever the context is, whether you're in a hotel, whether you're on the road, it's non-contextual. You brush your teeth, whether you're in night shift, whether you're grieving, whether you're happy, your mood, all of those things do not affect those habits. You do them anyway. Now, those habits are wired. So let's assume, so every habit, for example, has a trigger. So imagine there's a network that wires that habit in your brain. It's hardwired in your brain. When you get a trigger for that habit, you execute it. So there's a cue or a trigger, and then there's a response. All right. Now, what happens over a period of time is that when the trigger comes on, the neurons that sense the trigger fire. And the response that you give out or the response that you carry out, all right, is also connected to the other side of the neuron. Now, if you do that repeatedly, it fires and fires and fires. That connection becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. So that's why we hear that what you don't use, you lose. All right. So when you respond in a particular way to a particular stimulus over and over again, those neurons fire over repeatedly, and then they become hardwired. That's why old habits die hard. All right. And that's just something that is in us, innate in us. The other day, my son picked me up and was like, he just said, I think he did something wrong, and I was trying to correct him, but he just asked me, and that question really made me pause. That why are you hungry? I think what he did was so little, but I wasn't hungry. He said, "But you're hungry." I said, "No." He said, "But you're raising your voice." All right. And then for the first time, I realized that, man. And then one day he asked, they said, "Why?" Because of course we watch a lot of Netflix, and on Netflix you get a lot of Nigerian movies. Like, why do you shout? My 10-year-old, 11-year-old was asking me, why was it, even when a man wants to be romantic in a Nollywood movie, it's still with a lot of aggression and I love you, and there's a lot of like, why do we that kind of thing? And it's almost automated behavior, automated response. Like, you have to be loud and you have to be, just low, calm down. And the day that conversation happened with my son, I actually thought about it, that why? Well, the reason is just habits, all right, because it's happened over and over again. And if you live in a culture where the louder you are, your authority, is really defined you by you raising your voice and you're trying to exert authority like a gorilla bouncing their chest, that kind of thing. All right, then that's what you listen, praise. I can be, you're an expert in child behavior and looking after kids and all that. So I'm sure, so you understand what I'm talking about here. So pretty much that's where the whole concept of wiring and firing together is, that when neurons fire together over a period of time, they become hardwired. And a lot of our old habits, that's why our past experiences, all of those things come, all right, they become so hardwired that to now form new habits become challenging. So one of the things I teach is about habit reversal, reversing old habits and forming new habits, particularly healthy habits. All right. And if you find good behaviors that you have, how then do you translate them, automate them into habits so that they can, because the reality is that old habits die hard. And the reason is because the neuronal networks that underpin some of these habits don't deconstruct. Of course, over a period of time, the less you fire them, the less they become useful. All right. And you can actually reverse habits. But the only way to reverse habits is by forming new habits. So one of the very good examples I would give is, for example, is the chocolate, the chocolate neurons. So it's an example. So your doctor saying lose weight this year, all right, and you've done an audit of your oral intake, and you realize that yes, one of the reasons why you're gaining weight is because you like chocolate in the evenings. And what's the trigger for the chocolate tiredness? So when you're tired and you still have a bit of work to do, you go to your pantry, you get chocolate. All right. And that's now become hardwired in your brain. It's really hard to let go of it. So in order to deal with that, you then have to find, okay, new pathway for that trigger. So when the trigger comes tiredness, you want to have a cup of green tea. Okay. So that means you get rid of the chocolate, you buy some green tea, you get a tiredness, that's the cue. All right. You get green tea. All right. Now, if you do that over and over again, of course, there's always a period of latency there, which is called limbic friction. So there's a period there where it's really hard for you where you'll find it really tempting and very hard. And that's just natural. We can't talk about all of the whole process of habits now, but I'm just trying to sort of simplify it. All right. So by doing that repeatedly over a period of time, you will just slowly develop a appetite for that green tea. All right. And before you know it, that's it. Now, I don't use sugar in my tea. I can't remember the last time I had sugar in my tea, or the last time I had a fizzy drink. But how did I get off fizzy drinks? It was hard initially, but I was just intentional. Okay, instead of fizzy drink, I'll have an alternative. All right. And by doing that over and over again, it just becomes. And the other thing you must also understand in this context here is that your brain is a predictive machine. All right. Your brain is a predictive machine. Your brain always likes to expend the least amount of energy for any task. That's why our brain likes to automate things. 70% of your behavior every day are habits. So can you imagine that 70% of the behaviors that you do, you don't even think about them, they're all automated. Only 30% of your behaviors do you have to really think about and plan. So that's just the way we are designed, all right? And your brain can predict based on past experience. So for example, and the example I often would give is, and I can pick on you, Tolani, for example, that if you, have you ever consumed a bottle of Coke on a hot sunny day?
Yes, I have.
You can remember that experience.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So just imagine. Let's just imagine now. Imagination are visual thoughts. So when you imagine, actually, imaginations are thoughts, but they're visual thoughts. So let's just imagine it's a hot sunny day. It's a Sunday afternoon, hot sunny day, and your mouth is dry. All right. And someone gives you a bottle of Coke. Bottle of Coke on a hot sunny day. When would you start to feel refreshed? When would you start feeling refreshed? Like how many minutes, hours, or what? When you start drinking, how soon will you get refreshed? Is it immediately, a few seconds later? It's not a trick
Okay, so
question.
I don't take fizzy drinks anymore, but then I'm trying to go back in time. I think immediately the drink touches my tongue or my mouth, it just feels
Yes,
very
correct.
relaxing immediately.
Absolutely. You're absolutely correct. But what if I told you that was not biologically possible? Because that doesn't biologically make sense. Now, let me tell you what happens when you're thirsty. When you're thirsty, your blood volume drops, the chemoreceptors in your blood will fill, your concentration is high, your brain activates the receptors, your mucous membranes are very dry. All right. So there's a bit of process that happens on the behind the scenes. So you get a bottle of Coke, you're really thirsty, you drink. The Coke takes about, the fluid and the sugar there takes about half an hour in your stomach before it gets absorbed. So biologically, before anything changes in you, it takes about 30 to 40 minutes. All right. But why is it that already you're feeling great immediately? All right. That's the predictive power of the brain. Your brain is saying, hey, there is sugar, there's water in the system, thirst receptors go away, dopamine. You're getting the dopamine hit, a lot of reward, a lot of pleasure. You're getting the pleasure even before your biology has changed. That's the predictive power of the brain. You're feeling refreshed already. That's your brain feeling that, yes, this is coming. Things are changing. All right. That's the predictive power of the brain. And it's so powerful that and it's so powerful that a lot of the positive experiences we have come from that, being able to activate the reward centers in the brain. So I know I've gone here and there and I've trying to sort of put this together, but just to summarize that, yes, that it's true that neurons are wired together, all right, but and I've just tried to illustrate that with habits and how you can then sort of form new habits and translate that into your behaviors. Okay, so if you've got old habits that are not healthy, that are not helpful for you, whether emotionally, whether every habit has its 3 dimensions. So you've got every habit has an emotional component, a thinking pattern component, a thought component, and also a behavioral component. Every habit that we have. So, all of that has to be dealt with in that sense. The other aspect of the question, I'm just going to give you one exercise that I think will be useful. And I think if we all get this exercise, will be powerful. So one powerful brain exercise that I find to be useful is visualization. I think visualization as a brain exercise is not, people really do not understand how powerful that is. Recently, I did a video on Instagram about visual focus versus vision boards. And a lot of people this type of the year do have vision boards, and they really do not understand that it's not the visual board that really matters, it's visual focus that matters. All right. I've only had one vision board since 2020. I don't make vision boards every time. I call mine action boards rather than vision boards. But what's really important is visual focus. And the reason why visual focus is important is because visual focus sustains mental focus. Our mental focus is very distractible. So you start at the beginning of the year, you want to do something. Once you're aware of what you want to do, your brain directs your attention to that thing. So we call that selective attention. All right. That's why if you want to buy a Mazda, you start saying Mazda everywhere. That's selective attention. Your perception increases. Okay. So your brain raises awareness about that thing. Oh, I want to learn a new musical instrument. Oh, I want to start losing. I want to do something. There's that raised awareness. Once you found the why of what you want to do, your brain raises awareness in that space. Okay. And your focus shifts to that particular thing. Once that happens, you're primed to do that. So, but then in order to maintain that focus, you need visualization. Visualization is so powerful because every time you visualize something, you activate the same circuits in your brain, all right, that will help you deliver that. So you prime your brain for action. You select those networks in your brain that will require that action to be performed. So let me say this now. This is not about, inspire to aspire, motivational stuff. That's stuff. So just imagine that you want to go out. In fact, one of the things I tell people how to overcome the big friction or to overcome the procrastination or tiredness that comes from a new behavior you want to embark on. Let's say you want to wake up in the morning, jog for 30 minutes every morning. You will wake up in the morning. If you practice visualization and just imagine yourself dressing up, getting out of the house, just for a few seconds of just reflecting on what you want to do and visualizing it. Just by doing that, you're already priming your brain for action. And that's one way of overcoming that inertia All right. So a lot of people, when they struggle with things, just imagine just sitting there, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I see myself getting out there and all that. You're already selecting those neurons that will be responsible for those actions and priming them to move. Okay. It's powerful. Visualization is powerful. And in fact, it's connected to faith. You know, there's a conjunction between our faith, spirituality, and science, and some of these things, to be honest with you. All right. So you being able to constantly picture your future, all right, and reflect on it. One of the things that visualization does is that it activates the reward centers in our brain. It makes it activate reward centers, because what will help us, help us sustain our journey, all right, is the reward system. So when you start a new behavior, all right, your attention is focused on that. You have that arousal stress to start that journey. But what will keep you from giving up is having your reward systems activated. And one way to activate the reward system is practicing visualization. All right. So, and you can do that in different ways, whether it's by using a vision board, whether it's just by having creative imagination, whether it's just by documenting things properly, all right, journaling or whatever it is. Okay. But that's a brain exercise that I think is, people do not understand it enough. It's not just daydreaming and creating fantasies. So let me just summarize it. You have a plan. This is what I want to do. I want to read or write a book or write every day, you know, and you've decided that's what you want to do for this year. All right. At the beginning of the exercise, even before you start, visualize yourself doing it and visualize your outcome. The more you visualize your outcome over and over again, the likelier you are going to be able to, the more likely you're going to deliver it. All right. Roger Bannister was the first man that ran a mile under 4 minutes. The first day he ran a mile under 4 minutes. That year, two or three other people ran a mile under 4 minutes. There's power in visualization. When we see people living when we see people achieving what we want to achieve, there's a way it mobilizes us. There's a way it energizes us to do the same thing. Florence Chadwick is a woman I love so much. She was the first woman that swam across the English Channel from England to France, from across the English Channel. And the first time she tried doing it. She almost got to the end before she gave up, even though her mom and her doctor were in the boat, and she was just a few hundred yards from the end. But the fog was so thick she couldn't see the finish line. So she said she was going to do it again. So what she did was to go to the end. She visualized where the end was, and then she tried again. And when she tried, it was so painful. It was cold. But she said she just kept looking at the end. She kept picturing that end. Someone said it's only the future that you can picture that you would feature. Well, that's motivation, but it's powerful and it's true. All right. Visualizing the end. So, you know what faith is, and you know how God works. God, is the one that says those things that are not as though they were. All right. It's still that language of visualization and very powerful. Not sure whether I'm answering your question.
Oh, yes, you have. Before now, I'd never thought about the fact that visualization can actually be an activity for the brain. I usually would think it's just a fit activity. But now I know that it's a brain activity, and thank you so much for that. I want to quickly ask a question that I saw in the chat room. It says, morning and evening brain, how does that brain type affect the learning of the evening brain children in most schools that starts in the morning? We can't wait for a child's brain to wake up when people are ready to go home. However, it will be good to consider and accommodate them. What are your thoughts, Doctor?
Yeah, spot on. You're really spot on with it. Without the person asking that question is very true. And in fact, the proportion of younger people who have an evening brain are more than that of adults. More adults have morning brains, and and some of that is just due to life in general. That's why your teenager is more likely to want to sleep in bed and not wake up early and struggle in the morning, and then in the afternoon they're sort of much more alert and awake. It's just the way some of them are wired. And I think it's important for us to understand, particularly, I'm not a parenting expert now, but yes, there are certain kids that are wired differently. And so what I would, for example, teach when I teach peak performance to executives and to leaders is that understand the way your brains are wired. And for those who are more, your high energy hours, that's the first 8 hours of your day. If you're a morning brain person, or if you're an afternoon brain person, that will be the middle 8 hours of your day. Or if you're a night person, the last 8 hours of your day. you've got to find ways to put in your eye energy, cognitive energy into those activities into that space. So, for example, if you're a morning brain person, you don't want to spend all of your morning talking in meetings and doing reports and stuff. You want to spend more time doing strategic things, decision making, and stuff like that. So it would help you arrange your calendar, arrange your schedule. And I think for parents, of course, if you understand that your kid is much more cognitively, sound and at their peak in the afternoons, then even if they've come back from school, they can then reinforce what they've learned at that time, and we can support them in that way. Because of course, you can't change the school calendar or timing or stuff like that. But I do agree with you that that's often a sort of challenge for people. And there are some people that are they've got a night brain. It's at night that they flourish. They can then get on with their stuff and do great things at night. And, why not? You need to know how you're wired and how you can maximize that. But I do agree, it's always a challenge.
All right. Thank you, Mrs. Runke-Posh. I hope that he was able to answer that question. Okay, so I have another quick question here. It says that, how does the mind of an ADHD and autism work? I think this person is also talking about children.
Very interesting as well. So we can't go too deep into that now. But the problem is with attention. Now, every time you want to start any new thing, the first thing that is activated is your attention system. In fact, your most prized possession is your attention. All of us right here on this call, our attention is our most prized asset. Everything is vying for attention. The world is vying for attention. So attention is really essential in order for us to be able to be productive. You can't be productive if you cannot guard your attention properly, direct the focus of your attention to the tasks that you want to carry out. Now, for kids with ADHD, the problem they have is that they are unable to, their brain is unable to manage their attention appropriately in a way that they'll be productive. So they've got this attention deficit, and it can happen in adults. It's not just in kids. Those kids are also hyperactive, but not all of them are. Some just have attention deficits, and so they are unable to. So let me. I'm not sure whether that person. Let me just put it this way: when you select something, when you I want to do something, and you select a particular task that you want to focus on and do, like I want to write a book. There are certain neurons in your brain, all right, that are activated. They release a hormone called acetylcholine that helps prime your brain for that particular task and that action. And so you're able to attain to that. You'll start to see things that are related to that. Your perception will be directed to that particular thing. You'll be interested in podcasts, going for lectures, attending programs like these, things that will be in line with your vision, all right? Now, kids with ADHD can just not sustain their attention. Their brain cannot produce enough of those hormones to direct their attention to any particular task. So if you give them anything, they forget. They are very brilliant, very intelligent. So it's not a problem with intelligence or creativity. It's a problem of being able to, they can't sustain enough of their attention to be creative enough or to carry out any tasks. And it can happen in adults. I've got a few ADD adult patients actually in my practice, all right? And we co-manage them with the psychiatrists and psychologists. So it's certainly a growing challenge, even within in adult medicine as well. I'll just stop there. I don't want to go too deep into.
All right. I'm sure the person is in the room, and then Dr. Lee has been able to answer your question. So I'll quickly go to the next question. It says that, is there a difference between male and female or black and white brain? And what defines the effectiveness of the human brain?
Sorry, what do you mean by black and white?
Okay, so it's believed, some Africans will believe that, or the reason why someone who is probably Canadian or someone who is born and brought up in the US is smarter than people in Africa is because of the way their brain is wired. So, and some people also feel some men are smarter than women just because of the way the brain is wired. Why others believe otherwise? They say no, it's the women who are smarter. So the question is saying that, is there a difference between how our brain is being made up as a male and female, and as someone who is from, other parts of the world and for Africans?
Yeah, in terms of gender, yes, not in structure, but in the way parts of the brain have been, in the way some of the parts of the brain have been, I'm trying to look for the word, being fine-tuned or refined, yes.
Okay.
And I will talk about that. All right, so there's some differences in terms of the specialization of different parts of the brain, but generally, there are no differences. Let's just quickly dismiss the racial stuff. No, there are no differences in terms of the brain structure across races. What would differ would be culture. And of course, our culture and our attitudes, all of those things are wired in us. Our culture and are all wired in us. So for example, and for those who are in diaspora, you probably have the same experience. In 2018, my wife and I came back to Nigeria with our two boys, and we decided when we got married, then we did not, our families actually not met. We did our wedding in Australia, but we went back for our traditional engagement. So our extended families would meet each other. Of course, it was a big party and a big deal for our parents. So our son then was 7 years old, and he just could not understand a lot of things, and he kept asking why are people doing this, why are people doing this, why are people culture is different, and we have to, there's nothing wrong about this, it's just a culture. All right. And when we have a particular culture, some things are very good about our culture, some things are not good about our culture. And those things affect our behavior and the way we relate with people and how we relate with people and how we act. Some of these things are also wired in our brains anyway. And so it takes a lot of intentionality. It takes a lot of intentionality to not act in those ways. So the main difference is culture. It's not, sometimes race seems to be overextended. Listen, I'm only one of two Black neurologists in the whole of Australia. Australia is very, very white. All right. I've got, a clinic of almost 5,000 patients. 99.9% of my patients are white. All right. And, I don't think that I don't think that I'm less comfortable than any of my white colleagues. I don't think that. But of course, our approach to life and all of those things are different. All right. And the way we process things will be different. So for example, why is it that suicide rates in Australia and New Zealand are very high? People don't have resilience because they always get things what they want over and over again. All right. And they want this to get it, they want this to get it. And there's no, and then when they don't get it, they don't have resilience, they just want to give up, and people end their lives. I've had patients who have committed or attempted suicide because they had an argument with their girlfriend. All right. And, simple like that. So all of those things are wired in the brain in a way and can affect the way our brain develops. So there's no doubt about the fact that our past experiences, past trauma, all of those things, they matter. And those things are wired, they affect our emotions. And the problem is that a lot of us don't deal with those things, past experience, past trauma, don't properly process them. We don't properly process our, when I teach emotional mastery, for example, I talk about interrogating our emotions and not just sweeping them under the carpet and knowing that you are not your feelings. I've got a book here, You Are Not Your Brain. All right. You're not your feelings, you're more than your feelings, you're more than your emotions, and interrogating and properly processing them is helpful. So that's a very non-specific way of answering that question. So
no, you answered that. What you're just trying to achieve is to say that the color of our skin does not affect the effectiveness of the human brain.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
you have been able to answer that. I'm going to take one more question before I come into the chat room. And it says that we have been looking at how to live a limitless life on this show today. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I just wanted to say two quick things about the differences between a man and a woman's brain. All right.
Okay.
So structurally, all the sites, all the components of the brain are the same, but the main gender differences is in particular parts of the brain. All right. Particularly, for example, we now know that that number one, brain development is different in girls and in boys, and in parts of the brain, for example, with language, and are much more developed in girls earlier than in boys. Of course, boys catch up, but that gap still exists. So that some of certain aspects of language areas are much more developed in women than in men. All right. There's no doubt about that. And when I mean language, it's not just about talking, it's about intonation, it's about all the other nuances around language and being able to pick out some of those things. That's why as a woman, you're more likely to pick up attitude like even my wife and I still argue, but like I still question her. My son, she tells him to do something and don't give me, I'm like, what attitude? He's just saying no. Like, but she can pick out his tone, his volume, every beat. I don't know how she's able to pick that out. And that's just, just naturally that women can communicate when it comes to language communication, nonverbal communication, gestures, cues, get things done, that kind of thing. And she's, like when I'm preaching and my wife is in the front, all right, I know when I'm in trouble. She will not move one muscle, but there's a way she would do her face that I know, so I've made a mistake here. When I get home about this, I probably will struggle to get her attention if I want to, I probably have a right to note and give someone to send to her, that kind of thing. So there's no doubt about that the language areas of the brain are much more advanced in women than in men. All right. Of course, all of these are generalizations, but on average, we're looking at averages. Okay. The other thing that women can do effectively or better than men is what we call task switching. You call it multitasking, but we call it tasks. Because there's nothing like multitasking in the brain, So even though we call it multitasking is a misnomer. The brain does not multitask. Your brain can do only one thing at a time. All right. But your brain task switches. It may be at a very fast rate, like microseconds. All right. But switching between tasks. Okay. That ability to do that, which is related to the attentional resources of the brain, are much more efficient in women than in men. All right. And most men, for example, will not be able to, handle that. Like my wife recently had surgery, and I can tell you how hard it is to get in the morning, make breakfast, do this, do that. Like even to the church, because my wife is still recovering from surgery, and getting everybody ready for church and getting breakfast. Like this morning, I made some breakfast for my son, and then it's giving me attitude that it's eating well. You have to eat it. I got late to prayer meeting this morning, to be honest with you. We never go late to church when my wife is there. She's just able to manage everything and manage time and just get the whole thing right. But this morning I struggle to do that. And I have a PhD. She doesn't. Doesn't matter. Just biology. Having a sense of time, having a sense of having your hand on the pulse, your clothes, everything, I still yet the night before she chose all the boys what they're wearing, what everybody's wearing. Listen, that ability to do that, there's a biological basis for that. There's no doubt about that. Okay. Some of it is culture though. Some of it is culture, and you can bridge that with culture. Like if we train our boys to bridge that gap, they can actually improve in that area as well. And then the final thing is spatial awareness. Spatial awareness, this is a little bit better. So our brain's ability to be spatially aware. So women tend to be able to, even though they're able to multitask, but their awareness of things may be focused on a particular thing, and they may not see the bigger picture. And so they may just get zoned in on one thing, and not just see the bigger picture. And men are able to do that. So whilst a woman is talking about buying something and treating this person right, the guy will be like, oh, hey, we've got bills, we've got this, we've got that. So that spatial awareness from a biological point of view, those things are really there. So those are the sort of differences that we can pick up from there.
Oh, so sorry, my network was up there. Okay, so so far we've been talking about limitless, how to live a limitless life, right? So the question is, can the brain be tricked to believe that you can get whatever outcome that you want? Can you trick your brain to believe whatever it is that you want it to believe? Is it possible that you do that?
Yes, but you can't trick your brain. Your brain is what defines you. What do you mean by trick your brain? You can't trick your brain. That's
So when it comes to belief, we're talking about your thoughts being limitless. Yeah, okay.
I understand your question. I'm just telling you that you can't trick your brain.
So what is happening in there? How do I move myself to begin to? You said something about automation the other time. How do we get into that space?
Yeah. Well, I understand what you're trying to say. I understand, but I'm just trying to say that you can trick someone else, not you know, except one. Yeah. So you can trick, because your decision, the decision to trick your brain by the brain. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? The decision, your brain is made by your brain. So you can't trick your brain in that sense, but you can help. You can help your brain to learn faster. You can help your brain. You can provide things in your brain that provide, by understanding how your brain works, you can actually help your brain. By understanding how your emotional makeup is, you can help your brain better. Do you understand? By understanding the importance of past trauma in your current life, in the way you are, your space right now, your relationship, you can help your brain better. All right. So what I will say, we'll call it brain hack, which is what you're saying, a shortcut, a brain hack. How can you become more, powerful, or how can you have more impact, or how can you be more productive with your brain? Starts with a session like this, understanding how the brain works, understanding how you're all the different areas. So for example, if we're talking about we've talked about our executive functions, our prefrontal cortex, and that for some people, they've got a morning brain, an afternoon brain, an evening brain. It's important to know when your high energy hours are, and knowing how you plan your schedule, how you arrange your time so that you can fit in those things that require a lot of cognitive resources into the times when you're in your peak. All right. Now, the other thing you can do, for example, is to take regular brain breaks. You cannot sustain attention for more than 90 minutes at a time. That's just 90 minutes. So we call it the ultradian cycle. The same thing in sleep. In sleep, we've got 5 stages of sleep. We move through each stage every 90 minutes. When we're awake, the same thing happens. Every 90 minutes, we lose grip of our attention. And within the 90 minutes, you're only able to focus for like 30, 40 minutes. So when I teach executives, who want to carry out stuff, what I tell them to do is to find out what we call their phase one. The phase one period of their day is the day when they've got high, where they're really on point. So if it's in the morning, all right, I teach them how to improve their alertness, how to be alert. All right. So examples of things that can improve your alertness for a task. So let's assume you want to write a paper, all right, and you want to finish that paper by March. All right. So how do you get yourself alert? All right. In the morning, one of the things you can do is to have a cold bath, not a warm bath. That increases your alertness. Okay. Number 2, you can have a run, 20 minutes run, zone 2 cardio, not like killing yourself. Zone 2 cardio means you're walking or jogging and you can still talk. Any activity that you can do and you can still talk is zone 2. Keeps your heart pumping, floods your body with a bit of cortisol, keeps you awake. Number 3, exposure to sunlight in the morning, bright light. If it's so cold for those who are in diaspora, winter, bright light in the morning, exposed, because when that happens, when light eats your neuroretina, it causes the release of cortisol, gets you awake, reduces your melatonin level that makes you sleepy, gets you alert, you're primed for action. So by exposing yourself to light, having a morning exercise, having a cold bath, if you need a bit of coffee is really good as well. For those who like coffee, it dampens adenosine, which makes us sleep and makes us alert. So that's alertness. The next thing is, remember, so once you're alert for the task, divide your day into beats of 90 minutes. Even if you're in the office, every 90 minutes you should take a brain break of 5 to 10 minutes. 5 to 10 minutes every 90 minutes. Okay. Don't, that's why if you're like a coach or you're doing a webinar, don't hold people more for more than 90 minutes. I know we have held you more than 90 minutes, so I can understand that right now. But generally, that's just the way the brain is wired. And remember, within that 90 minutes, it takes about 5 to 10 minutes to warm up to be there. All right. And then after about 40, 45 minutes, your attention actually drops down a little bit. Okay. So you must understand that. Have a break. And the break, it can be watching something on Facebook, it can be being distracted, you can moving around or whatever it is you want to do. But make sure you also avoid distractions, okay, during that 90 minutes. So your phone, all the notifications, you take them off so you can really focus and concentrate on what you want to do. And the final thing that I think would really help your brain is practicing silence and inner soul. Okay, having moments where you're just calm on the inside. All right, whether it's meditation, mindfulness, whatever it is, it's really helpful. That's one of the things I'm learning right now, being just listening to silence. All right. And in fact, I'm going to be doing a webinar very soon on the science of silence. And it's going to be next month. I'm learning so much about silence, and people don't know how powerful and how therapeutic silence is. Listening to nothing, how powerful that is, and just how refreshing that is. All right. The other thing that I'll talk about is sleep as well. Sleep is, your brain is regenerated, restored during sleep. Memories are consolidated during sleep. Emotions are processed during sleep. All right. For every person between the age of, let's say, 17 and 49 to 50 or even 60, 7 to 9 hours of sleep every day is recommended. Anything less than that, you're cheating yourself. You should have adequate sleep, because in sleep, your brain is restored, regenerated, and you can't really be at your peak if you're sleep deprived. So those would be the things that I would say. So rather than saying tricking your brain, I would say you can enhance your brain, all right, with those kind of things. And you combine that with visualization, you combine that with other brain exercises, depending on what you want to do, all right, then you'll be powerful. Let me summarize all of this into 4 things that I teach, all right, when you want to automate good behavior. Number 1, awareness. All right, awareness. Be aware of what you want to do. Find your why. Have your purpose. Find your goal. Anything you want to do. You want to learn a new skill. You want to learn a new musical instrument. You want to learn a new language. You want to write a new book. You must find the why. You know the Simon Sinek's book. Start with a why. Know why you're doing that. Awareness. Once you find your why and you know your purpose and you know why you want to do it, there's a way it switches on your brain. All right. Number 2, attention, focused attention. All right. Make sure you dedicate attention to that. Once you're aware of it anyway, your brain directs attention to it, and then you sustain that attention with visual focus, with your vision box, with you surrounding your people of with yourself with people of like mind. Number 3 is deliberate practice. Make sure you have a routine. You know, when I was in medical school, my first year of medical school, someone told me something. They said, successful people do daily what unsuccessful people do once in a while. The secret of your future in your daily routine. I never forgot that first year medical school, your daily routine. Okay, read. If you've got to read every day, whatever you want to do, you do it very consistently. It doesn't have, I've learned something, I learned it from Peter Scazzaro, called the daily office, which is my daily office with God. All right. So every day, twice a day, 25 minutes of silence and solitude with God. I've been practicing now for the last 2 months, where I'll just be on my own. I'm not talking, I'm not praying, I'm just being with God. I'm not even asking him anything. I'm just there silent. No music, nothing. That's when I'm saying I'm learning a lot about silence. All right. And I get more revelation by not asking God anything and just being with him in silence, or sometimes just worshiping him alone. So it's very, very important that we are aware of that deliberate practice. All right. Very important action. And then the last one is accountability. All right. So self-accountability through journaling. The other way you can help yourself with that new behavior is, as I've talked about, activating the reward systems. That's what accountability does. You know, being in a group like this where you can be reminded of what you want to do, and other areas, getting a coach, getting a mentor, stuff like that. Wow.
Wow. All right, I'm learning. My notes is so full here, and I still have quite a number of questions. I'm just going to run through them quickly. This person is asking, he says, how do you determine if you're a morning or evening brain? And the second question says, how can an adult address ADHD issues in themselves? That's 2 questions in one. How do you determine if you're a morning or evening person, and how do you address ADHD in adults?
For the ADHD thing, of course, you need to see a clinician, but the issue there is focus. You just find it difficult to focus on a thing. You just keep jumping on things and you're never able to fully complete a task. You find yourself, even simple tasks like, you know, I'm going to mow the lawn, I'm going to do this, I'm going to shop here. It's not forgetfulness, okay? The problem is that when people have attention deficit, they are forgetful, but their forgetfulness is not because they've got memory problems. Their forgetfulness is because they can't focus. All right, if you're not paying attention, you become more forgetful. All right. And so the first thing is, of course, you need to see a healthcare professional for proper diagnosis and all that, if that's the case. But there are simple things you can do, for example, like minimizing distractions. Remember, a distraction is an attraction that is vying for your attention. Your attention is what your prized possession. You must understand that. So one of the things, for example, you can do is to take a break from things, all right, and take away from distractions. Have a break, have a social media holiday. I think was it last year I went on a 3-month social media holiday. All right, nothing. I didn't delete my accounts, but I just removed all the apps. All right, and I just went blank. Of course, I'm lucky enough that I have people who help me with social media, or people like some of my mentees and all that. So if I have anything, I'll just text them, please just put it out there. And if there's anything, they'll give me feedback about the response. But yes, you can do all of that. And then I deleted all the apps. I deleted all news apps from my phone. All right. In fact, I got a burner phone, a Nokia, those Nokia 3310 old phones.
Yeah.
I got one of them, and that's when I want to go dark. I put my SIM in there, I go dark, no apps on it, just phone calls and text messages from people who are really important. So there are times when, because there's a lot of noise, do you know that the average executive, which and who are the people I deal with, all right, responds to about 128 notifications or emails every day. Do you know that you're distracted as you're sitting there, you're distracted every 11 minutes. There's a distraction. The informational noise. Eric Schmidt said this, the former CEO of Google, that from 2003 up till now, every 2 years, we generate more data than had been generated in the history of mankind in terms of the volume of data, the Zoom calls, all the text messages, the notifications, Instagram. Look at all the amount of data we're exposed to. The informational noise is crazy. Group emails. Who invented group emails? How many group emails do you receive? All right. And how many of them are relevant? Marketing emails. How many of those? Go check your spam and see or what about the like button that Facebook created? Is that not one of the people who know the power of the like button that Facebook, there was no like button in Facebook before, that invention of the like button, which is now gone to almost all the platforms, and how powerful they are on our attention. So for somebody who's having attention issues, the first thing is, all right, minimize distractions. All right, and see how you go. And if you're still struggling, see a healthcare professional. All right, that's what I would say about the second question. The first question I can't remember. Sorry, what was the first question?
How do you determine whether you're morning or evening person?
Well, you'll have to come sign up for my own masterclass, I reckon. Great secrets. But I think the simple thing is just where are you most productive? Like, you want to do something that requires a lot of brain power. When would you do it? You do it in the morning. Do you wake up in the morning and feel like, okay, yes, I'm going to lock myself in the office and I'm going to get this done? Do you feel bright, sharp, alert? Or do you feel it's when you get home at night, everybody's sleeping, 2 a.m., then that's when you feel boom, you feel that's it. That's a very simple way. Sometimes the reality is that the timing of our brains, may not fit into our schedule, work, family, all of those things. So that's where it's challenging for people. And can you shift? Yes, you can shift. For example, a lot of kids that have afternoon brains don't have an option. They have to go to school in the morning, and you see some kids do very well with tests and assessments that are based in school, and all that, but they're not, and so they may even achieve less than their capacity. But if you're a parent and you know what your child is like, then you can provide the support for them, that kind of support, so that they can flourish in that way. I'm not sure that I've answered that question.
Yeah, you have. Another question says, what type of food enhance brain development for children and for adults? What types of food enhance brain development for children and for adults? And the second question says, you talked about 4 hours peak performance. Can it be increased?
That's on average. The 4 hours peak performance is an average. So that's just from studies.
So it means it can be more.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's on average. If you look at, and that's peak, it's not that, your peak performance. All right. So how many hours are you awake for in 24 hours? You look at how many hours you sleep, and then how many hours do you spend in just relaxation and not doing anything that is really highly cognitive. So by the time you do that, the reality is that in your wakeful hours, your high energy hours, so the day is in 3 phases, 8 hours, so you have 8 hours of sleep, and then the remaining 16 hours have 2 phases. Okay, one of the phases, your 0 to 8, which is from wakefulness, all right, to tiredness in the afternoons. Within that 8 hours, you have about 50% of it where you're at your peak. All right. So if you divide it into 3 phases, all right, and your highest, your best phase, within that best phase of 8 hours, you're going to be at your peak for about 4 hours out of that. And you can structure your 4 hours in a way that will make you more productive by having regular brain breaks and just dividing your time in a way that would sort of work for you. So I think it's different for everyone. So for example, I am morning brain. So if I want to do anything like write a paper or do something that is really, really high energy stuff, I do that in the morning. I'm going to be doing rosters, doing spreadsheets and checking my business accounts and doing a few other things that still require a bit of process, but not really. I do that in the afternoon. Or if I want to, but if I want to like write or develop a course or write an outline or get stuff like that done, I do it very early in the morning when I'm sharp. I sleep, wake up, get myself alert, I like coffee. I drink coffee every day. Get a cup of coffee, get myself then, and then take away all the noise, and then I can just focus and get the stuff done. So yeah, you got to find what works for you in a sense. I'm not sure whether that helps or that answers that question.
So what about the food enhancements? What are the foods that we can take that they can enhance the function of the brain?
Well, I generally don't. I think it's overrated foods that help the brain, because the reality is that most of the supplements and stuff that we need, proteins like tyrosine and all of those things, are in general healthy foods. And I think when you see a lot of, personally, I just feel that a lot of stuff about diet is overrated. Now, I'm not saying that diet is not important, but I think if you eat a healthy, balanced meal, you'll get enough of the nutrients that you require to sort of function properly and to, be okay. So I think that in this space, there's a lot more to do with your intentionality and with all the other practices we've talked about, rather than diet. I think it's overrated. I think, just a healthy diet is what I recommend. I don't generally prescribe any special foods except you've got particular deficiencies. But for example, people saying, okay, if you want to improve your memory, you eat this kind of food. I don't believe that that's true. So if you eat healthy, have regular meals, all right, healthy portions, and you have all the different nutrients, like all the different types of food, a balanced diet that is healthy, and you can just get what the healthy balanced diet that will go with your palate. That's fine. And if you've got any deficiencies in anything, of course, if you do regular medicals like blood tests, vitamins and all that, you'll find if there's anything deficient, you can take some vitamins to support that. I think you'll be okay with that. So that's my general view of that. Of course, there are certain types of food that has certain nutrients. If you're deficient in it and all that, we can talk about that later, but that's just my view.
Okay, thank you. I still have more questions coming in, but we really need to go. So I'm going to just go through and see if I can take one or two more questions quickly. Please, we're behind schedule. It's almost 4 o'clock and we still have to close it. So I'm just going to take like one more or two questions. I hope that's fine with you, Doctor.
Yes.
Okay, so my son has a...
Sorry, for all that is worth, so for all that is worth, okay, without being very prescriptive, general things that would have high protein diets that are healthy, like fish, whole grains, and then things like those, as I said, vitamins. Those are things. In Australia, we have this wonderful vegetable, which I really like. It's all over the world, broccoli, and I think the Italians have broccolini as well. So those are very healthy vegetables and all that. They've got enough nuts as well. But that's just been a little bit more. But yeah, that helps.
But basically, just eating balanced meal will do it. Okay. All right. So this question says, my son has a question based on your explanation of how women are more advanced in language. He wants to know if that's why women are Saza, I hope I pronounced that correctly, or more dramatic than men. That's question one. And the second question says, And the next one says, how does one born as a male or female believe they are meant to be another gender and do gender change or transgender? What part of brain is responsible for that?
Are you setting me up? That's a setup.
It's a question.
The first one I think is more, I just take that as a comment, that, yeah, does that mean women are more, is that why they're more sassier? I don't know.
The more dramatic?
I think,
Maybe.
yeah, maybe, women are much more emotive, they communicate more, they're able to read more, and I think that's just biological, the way women are. They're more personal, they've got more social emotional development than men. Men are more task oriented, while women are more social economical in their dealings, and they're able to read people more, engage with people more. I think on average, not all women are like that, and not all men are like that, but on average, you see those changes. So even though the parts of the brain are the same, but the parts of the brain that help with language development, and of course, language affects culture, language affects our social interactions. So women are more relational, women are much more expressive, all right, and in that sense, and women can read a lot more, get more cues. So if they're more dramatic, and in that sense, I think it may be the fact that, and a woman is more. There was a recent, someone sent me a video recently of a pastor in Nigeria who was preaching and saying that don't die. And he was saying that most women will, when they have burdens, they will talk to their friends, they will talk, they will pray, they will do that, and men will keep quiet, and then they will just hurt, they will not want to talk about things, and their ego will come in. Yeah, some of those things are actually based in biology. All right, and that women are much more expressive than men. All right, so I agree in a sense. The other question about transgender, I am not transgender, and I've got a lot of people who are transgender, and that I see mostly as patients in different ways. But I think that's gender is not biological in a sense. The transgender movement is more of social, is a social change. All right. That's my view, though. And I, when I came to Australia and I did my licensing exams, this is now almost going to 15 years ago. My licensing exams, one of the cases that this was a real case, it was a clinical exam, so they give me a patient, and the case was gender dysphoria syndrome. So meaning about 15 years ago, there was nothing like, in the medical field, it was a disease called gender dysphoria. And the question was a man who believes he was in a woman's body. So the man in the station was a man, but the question is that this person believes he's in a woman's body. How would you treat them? I passed that station though for my life exams. But today that's been scrapped out of our medical literature now, and now it's considered that to be normal. And of course, if I against that, it will be considered discrimination here, in our liberal society. So I don't think there's any particular part of the brain. I think those are just preferences and developed and designed by society and culture. There are people who just have inclinations towards things that are a bit different. They are different in their inclinations, but a lot of that is also societal. So I have not done enough research in transgenderism to be able to tell you that there's a gene or a particular part of your brain that will switch on and that will make you feel like a transgender. I think that a lot of us have different inclinations that we are unable to act on because of our societal values anyway. That people feel like, but you're not your feelings anyway. But if your society allows you to, if, for example, in the Western world, polygamy becomes fashionable, and the way things are going, the other day I was watching a reality show where a man had multiple wives in the United States, and it was a TV show. What will happen in 10 years where consenting adults will say, yeah, we will have polygamous relationships? Maybe people that have those tendencies will then come out and say, hey, this is the way I'm wired. Who knows? It's a crazy world. I've not answered that.
Right. I get it. I get it. And I'm sure that the person who asked the question also gets it. So this is where we end for today. Thank you so much, Dr. Neyi. I've personally learned some things and I've taken a lot of notes. Also, Savior, please, can you help me celebrate Dr. Neyi in the chat room? It's been an amazing session this day. I'm super excited about the session and I have noted the things that I'm going to work on as an executive, knowing that I have limited time. I have limited peak period that I need to maximize. Thank you so much for an amazing session. I'm going to right away hand over to Coach Peace. But it's good to have you here, Dr. Neyi. And please, when it's time for your talked about a webinar about silence, please, House of Savior is very much interested. We would like to keep in touch so that we know when you want to do this webinar and we're able to attend and also learn this science of staying silent. Thank you so much, everyone, House of Savior, for joining us today. Over to you, Coach Peace.
Thank you so much, Dr. Neyi. Thank you, Motalani. Thank you, PF, for this amazing session. Please, let's keep saying thank you because this session is powerful. He has given us more than we asked for. Thank you so very much, Dr. Neyi, for coming over. Who else feels, emphasis on feelings, that Dr. Neyi should come back? Please, in the comment section, drop I if you feel like he should come back and give us more of this. Drop I in the comment section.